Mr. Costello is here. He's just nipped to the loo. Here's Agnes Burnell and Chansonnette. There are warts on the bodies and... Agnes Burnell, and the song is Chansonnette, which is a track from an album called Father's Lying Dead, on the ironing board, and strong connections there with Elvis Costello. We'll talk about that particular lady a little bit later on, but it seems as though at the moment, Mr. Costello, you're working with all and sundry.
You might say that, yeah. Makes it sound a little bit indiscriminate, but I did a lot of recording at the end of last year, from the middle of last year, in fact, with various people, and it just so happens it's all come out at once, so it makes me appear like I've been an extremely busy person, but I am generally a busy person. At the moment, in fact, I was on a 6-month break, but somehow it seems to have evaporated into thin air.
A 6-month break doing what? A
6-month break from playing live and making records. But,
so what did you do in that time?
I made records, played live, and I haven't done any tours since I haven't played a concert except one miners' benefit and one solo gig. So I have really kept the live performance down to the absolute minimum, and been writing a lot, and as you say, a lot of other things.
But when you decided to take the 6-month break up, was it with the intention of doing absolutely nothing, or was it with the intention of...
I had all these great plans. I was going to go to Spain and write my great novel and learn to drive and learn to play the trumpet and all these things. I didn't do any of them, and I just got derailed somewhere along the line, and just ended up I enjoy myself a lot, and it's about time to... Spent 7 years without really taking much of a break, so sometimes I realise now the value of taking this kind of pause from a routine, which touring and recording gets into a bit of a spiral. It can do.
Why is it that there are certain things that you'd like to do then, like writing a novel or learning to play the trumpet or learning to drive, and you can't actually motivate yourself to do those, whereas you can with music?
Because I'm a lazy bastard, basically.
I can't believe that for 1 second.
Well, I am, obviously, in regard to that and the fact that I'm totally illiterate and colourblind, and I'm not colourblind, actually. I don't know my left from my right, though, so that's a bit of a disadvantage when you try to drive.
If you were to write a novel, what would it be about?
I don't think I will. I think I'd write a collection of short stories because I get bored too easily. And I'm sure anybody reading a book that I read would get bored even quicker.
Why do you think that would be?
Well, I think in shorter, segments. I mean, I've trained myself in that way of thinking. And songs, sometimes they're not telling a story, but those that tell a story, I mean, that's what I've learnt to do. Perhaps one of these days I might attempt writing something in another form, but it's only a crazy idea that you have.
Do you read a lot?
Not a tremendous amount, not as much as I should. But you always say that, at the beginning of every year, not being a real smoker or being a sort of a periodic drinker, I don't do the things like make resolutions to stop any of those things. But I do sort of always draw up a mental list of all those important books you're supposed to have read that I haven't. And the next year comes around and I still haven't read them, so I guess I'm not a very good reader.
So are you music 24 hours a day?
No, not with my neighbours. I'm about 10 minutes a day.
Well, what's the first track that we're going to play now?
Well, this is a title song of a film. This is a fella just gave me a tape with, with people here you're interested in R&B or kind of music. He was actually a journalist. He was one of the good guys. Gave me a tape of some stuff he thought I might not have heard, and among them, this actually came from a film called Heartbeat, which is a Sissy Spacek film. I never saw the film. I remember hearing it wasn't very good, in fact. But this is a song by Aaron Neville, who's from the Neville brothers and made records under his own name in the 50s and 60s. And I think one of the really remarkable vocal performances, particularly considering that it was just more or less a throwaway for a film, that you might never, ever hear of. So this is called I Love Her Too.
Aaron Neville and I Love Her Too. What an incredible voice.
Yeah, it's like those liquid, I think they call them lava lamps. Those old lamps with the plastic stuff goes up and down when you heat it. That's what his voice is like.
And you were saying that he did backing vocals.
Sorry, I had a sharp blow to the head late last night, and obviously it's having an effect on me.
You said that he did backing vocals on that as well?
Yeah, I think he did all the backing vocals as well. I heard a story that he did that vocal in 2 takes, but that's the kind of legend that builds up about songs. But I've seen him sing live, and he is the most remarkable singer. I mean, sings perfectly in tune, and with that kind of control live, when you often lose the subtleties of singing. Anybody that's seen me sing live will know that I lose the subtleties of singing quite easily.
Apart from him, who do you admire as a vocalist?
Oh, there's millions of them. I've got a huge, big list. I mean, some of them aren't really even what you'd call good singers, you know. I like Randy Newman's voice, and he just delivers the song really in a particular way for that sort of song. And then I'll like really, you know, the sort of things that everybody accepts are great, like George Jones and Ella Fitzgerald and Frank Sinatra. And then, I mean, I like Fred Astaire. I mean, he's a good singer. Yeah, he's not really even a singer. I mean, well, he's not a singer, he's a dancer, everybody knows that. There's a record of him dancing. Have you ever heard that?
No.
Yeah, it is a good... It really is a record of him dancing. It's Fred Astaire live at Carnegie Hall.
John Walters and I were taking the mickey out of tap dancers and doing things like that, but I didn't think there was a record of it.
Yeah, this is the radio station that once had a ventriloquist already. So I don't think the BBC has any place criticising.
Do you think, though, that some vocalists, particularly nowadays, can suffer because of overproduction?
I think they suffer worse from being terrible singers. and overproduction as well. Sometimes really good singers are swamped by their own ambition. And also they suffer from what I call the fabulous singer syndrome, which I think there are 1 or 2 of our better thought of vocalists today that suffer from it. I think it started back with Mel Torme, and it's never got any better.
Like who?
Helen Terry, I think, is a real over-singer, you know, and that's kind of sacrilege these days to say about those kind of people. I also think Tina Turner is an over-singer as well. I think she sings certain things with tremendous passion, but almost everybody on the We Are the World record is actually over-singing like crazy. Actually, it sounds like a Stevie Wonder impersonation contest if you listen to it in a cynical light. You know, I think it's a really worthwhile endeavour, but as a piece of music, it's absolute nonsense, you know. So
I heard somebody saying the other day as they were watching that, just proves that Americans are far better vocalists than anybody in Britain.
I think that's complete rubbish. I don't necessarily think that, you know, any kind of record done like that is going to be a wonderful piece of music. I think, as I say, you can't really... The reason for doing it is far outweighs any critical, sort of criteria, but when you actually watch it, now the thing has achieved some of its aim. Obviously, it was supposed to make a tremendous amount of money, which is great, you know. You can sort of afford to look at it and just realise how the vanities of some of the singers involved there are quite remarkable.
And this next particular track, didn't you turn this down?
Yeah, what's wrong about that? I did actually. This was actually, the very first track we played is an Imp record, which is my label. And occasionally I get tapes and things there. Sometimes they're not in a Finnish form, and sometimes they're in a Swedish form and a Norwegian form.
Oh, wait.
I get all kinds of things, and sometimes you don't always see the true jewel-like clarity of them immediately. There's a certain kind of record that I like to put out on Imp, and I think sometimes other people could do things better, and that's why I don't always, sort of immediately hot-foot it to people, round up people's abode with a contract in my hand, you know, because I don't have very much to offer them. It's a question whether you've got something to offer a group or an artist, other than just being able to put the record out, and with a certain kind of style or flair that you might be able to bring to it. That's really all I can say about the Imp thing. This is one of my favourite records. It's called Tommy's Blue Valentine with Pride of the Cross.
I have heard that love is funny.
Tearing your throat. Elvis Costello picked that, Tommy's Blue Valentine and from Pride of the Cross.
Take that, Sade.
Yes. So how does Imp work? What did it set out to do, and who is it?
Well, it set out to stop that record coming out immediately. Well, Imp just came about by accident, really. I put out a record called Pills and Soap while I was between contracts. I wanted the record out specifically at that moment. I think I made the decision on a Wednesday, and and I think I had an acetate in this building on the Thursday night. And so that came out, and so the machinery was there, the name was there. It was put out through the Demon independent label, which is part of F-Beat, which the Elvis Costello and the Attractions records come out on. And Phil Chevron came to me with the tape of him doing a version of Brendan Behan's song, Captains of the Kings, and said, was I interested in producing a record on it? And I said, yeah. So we went in and I said, the only difficulty is, you've got to understand that this is 18 months ago nearly now, and that there wasn't really the basis for a folk sort of instrumentation having any chance of getting any attention except on the Wally Whiten program, you know. So I said, as it was a satire of, I think, probably of Noel Coward, that's the original song, we had David Bedford do an arrangement, and we did it sort of like mock Elgar, which was a sort of musical joke to back up, to echo the sentiments of the song, and it seemed to work quite well, and those people that liked the record liked it an awful lot. And therefore the machinery was there to always to do something, but it wasn't like a record where we set up an office and, you know, worked every day. He doesn't, you know, nobody's on the payroll. You know, we use the offices of Demon when something needs to be done. Phil carries on with his project, does production works in a record shop, and consequently has his ear very much to the ground. When I came back to England, having been away on tour the first part of last year, I went along to see him. He was at this point engaged in doing the Agnes Burnell album, which subsequent to the Captains of the Kings had agreed to do, which was a slightly bigger project, obviously, because it required a lot more financial backing, arrangements, and a lot more musicians involved. And we could talk about that later. And I sort of asked him. There was starting the beginning of some sort of scene, I think, which is always very dangerous. Once the music papers get hold of it and stick labels on things, I'd seen it happen so many times before. We all have. I was curious to know whether any of these groups that were being touted were any good. And he said, yeah, the Pogues are a good group, you know. And they were already in the process of coming towards stiff. And the Men That Couldn't Hang were just in the infancy, really. I went along and saw them, and they were doing a version of the Green Fields of France. I think, you know, I don't think they would object to this, that they started out very much with the Pogues as their model and have developed their own style from that, as they've moved away from that sound. Put out the Green Fields of France, which did remarkably well in the independent charts, much to everybody's surprise, for a 7-minute ballad about death and doom, you know. A wonderful song, all the same. And, you know, the label just sits there waiting for somebody to come up with the bright idea of releasing another record on it, you know.
Presumably you sent loads and loads of demos, and you said before...
I'm not really a tremendous amount. I'm not saying this so that I get millions on, you know, next week. It's only if people sort of think there's something sympathy. The very difficult thing about it is that the first 3 records that came out on it had some sort of vague political overtone, so people naturally presume that everything has some sort of ideological stance. That isn't the case. That's a pure, mere coincidence, you know. If I'd heard the finished version of Thomas Blue Valentine, I certainly would have put it out. It was only in a rough mix stage. It wasn't actually finished when I heard the tape of it, and that's got nothing political about that at all. So it's really open to any sort of imaginative idea. That's what I'm looking for, is imagination. That's what all of the records that I brought with me today and we're going to play have got some spirit about them, which makes them worth putting on plastic. And so many records that are released through major companies are just a load of lies. They exist in an imaginary world, like Sade, imaginary sophistication for people who can't really be bothered to go and listen to Billie Holiday records. You know?
So, what do you think of something like ZTT?
I think it's really self-important. I liked the whole Frankie thing when it happened, you know. But I read a ludicrous quote saying Frankie Goes to Hollywood are the last great pop group. Paul Morley's been a journalist too long, you know. I think being given charge of a record company was the worst thing that could have possibly happened to him, really, because I quite like the man. I think he's quite funny in an irritating sort of way. And I think he feels the same way about me, you know. But I actually actively dislike this rather bogus 50s or early 60s view of European sexuality, which we're getting thrust down our throats with Anne Pagal and propaganda. I just think it's setting the clock back, you know, 25 years.
You said before that
it's not Europeanism. It's actually really jingoistic. You know?
You said before that if you didn't think that you could do a band justice, you wouldn't actually.
No, there's no point. I can't. I haven't the finances. You know, I'm not.
So
I'm not, contrary to popular belief, a very rich man. So I don't have the money to finance like big, tours and be able to give bands advances when they need to buy equipment and stuff. But on the other flip side of that is that we can do things properly, like we made the Agnes Burnell album properly.
Yeah.
It could have been done with piano and voice, but we decided to do it with small orchestral groups and do the songs justice to bring them to life. You know.
Next track, Tbone Burnett.
This is a song from Tbone Burnett's Behind the Trapdoor album, his sequel to The Trapdoor. It's a song called Strange Combination. That's Strange Combination by Tbone Burnett. He's a man whose gait suggests walking cubism and whose conversation slips from mutilation to art school with symbolic ease. It's also related to me. He's my brother. That's Tbone Burnett, who toured with me earlier in the century, twice last year, in fact, in America, and again in England. So some English people would have seen him, and through the discotheques of Switzerland and some other European countries.
Are you going to continue working with him?
Yes, in two shapes or forms. There's a shadowy duo who are putting out a record in. I think at the end of June, or maybe earlier than that, called the Coward Brothers, a song called The People's Limousine, which is either the next imp release or The Men Who Couldn't Hang's Iron Masters is the next imp release. It's just a question of whether we can afford enough plastic for both records. And then there is some vague possibility of recording the next album in Paraguay with him at the end of the year. Or, no, with a parakeet, I should say.
Are you a great Sam Cooke fan, Mr. Costello?
Yeah, I am. I had another of these wonderful things where people slip tapes into your hands in dark alleys and say, listen to this. And sometimes, there are people crooning, saying things like, I'm sorry, I would have made this demo better, but I couldn't afford a microphone. Which always confused me. So how did they get the words on the tape? Sometimes I get some really good songs, and sometimes, as I said before, I get, tapes that people have made up because they think you're going to be interested in them, which is a really nice thought. Somebody maybe reads somewhere that you have an interest in a certain artist, and they have a record you may not have heard, and it's really generous. And this is such a record, and this is the sugar-free Sam Cooke, and a song called Lost and Looking.
For my baby.
Smashing Durkin, and before that it was Sam Cooke and Lost and Looking. How do you find time to listen to music when you're working all of the time?
I don't very much, actually, no. Like I say, I get given tapes a lot when I'm touring, and since I haven't been touring, I seem to have found enough to occupy my time with working on one thing or another that I'm involved usually with that, that Pogues track was a B-side of Brown Eyes, which I produced earlier in the year. That was actually produced by Phil Chevron, so there's a kind of imp connection there, so getting it in everywhere. And, I really don't have that much time. I try to listen. I don't even have time to listen to all the records that come out on Demon, which is the label I'm sort of associated with. I don't really have any dealing with, with the decisions there, but I get all this records mount up at my office, and I rarely have time to play through all of them, I sit down and listen to, and tapes, I do listen to tapes that are sent to me. I don't just throw them away or anything. So between that, there isn't a lot of time for listening to records that you actually like yourself. Question of getting up in the morning and sticking on a tape or a record while you actually get doing all the other things that you just do at the start of the day.
What were the Pogues like, or what are the Pogues like to work with?
They're really good. A lot of this, I think, one of the things that one of the traps of a group with lively personalities such as they have in the group, is that that you tend to get a reputation for being outrageous or drunken, they certainly, there's a few of them definitely like a drink, but it's not the only string to their bow, by any means, and I wouldn't be working with them if, I can go get drunk with anybody if that's what I want to do. I wouldn't be working with them unless I thought they would make really good records. The songs are really good, and I think anybody that's got a copy of the Brown Eyes record has read the lyric. It's a really incredible lyric. And sometimes people just overlook that. They only see the thing that immediately strikes the eye, which is this kind of lively thing. And the minute people hear an accordion and a kind of 2/4 beat like that, they start jumping around and doing some sort of hybrid Highland fling. So imagine is what they're supposed to do to that kind of music. And really, of course, that's part of it, the excitement and everything that they generate. But there is a sort of, heart to it, you know, and there's really good songs in there inside those, inside on the first record as well, and certainly the record that we're working on at the moment. I never like to talk too much about what's contained on that record, but I can assure their listeners and their fans that they have songs that are tough to the core. There's a toughness that you don't have when you don't have to try, and nearly everybody that we've played today has got that quality. No matter how quiet the music is, Sam Cooke's got it, you know, Aaron Neville's got it. They don't have to try, and it's tough to the core, and that's what's important, you know. And we have at least one song that we're working on in current next few weeks, hoping to finish the record in the next few weeks. They're out their second album, which makes Brown Eyes, which is a very tough song, sound like How Much Is That Doggy in the Window by comparison, you know. So they've got some very strong songs that are I hope that people actually listen to them and still enjoy the kind of wilder side of it. I'm not saying we're going to make a serious record. It's got the humour and everything that's good, but, you know, you just go to one of their gigs and you see what's good about them, you know.
What do you like to work with?
Horrible. I'm an absolute tartar. No,
Are you very strict?
Well, I don't, the job is there to be done. It's all very well having a party in the studio, but if the next day you get up and the record sounds horrendous, then there's no point in doing it.
I would imagine that you don't suffer fools gladly.
Well, I don't work with any, so that's, you know, either in my own records or in the things that I do. I don't produce many records, and, you know, I wouldn't work on other people's records unless I have some degree of respect for them. They don't, you don't have to think they're the be-all and end-all to work with people, but you obviously got to have something, some sort of empathy, you know.
Ray Charles. Brilliant.
Yeah, well, this comes off a record which was a very influential record, I think, on a lot of people. I think it's from the modern sounds of country music, which was a kind of bold step when Ray Charles recorded it, probably nearly 25 years ago now, 20 years ago certainly, because, you know, coming from R&B, he suddenly did all these country songs, or country-based songs. This is called It Makes No Difference Now.
It hands me
Ray Charles, and It Makes No Difference Now. Before we get on to Agnes Burnell, do you have any plans to act again after your Scully appearance?
Well, I'm in a small role in a film which has just been completed, but I don't think it's really my place to mention it too much. But I will say that it involves a skill that nobody thought I had, and it's not a blue movie.
I wondered. You did have me think. Can you not even tell us what sort of character it is?
No, I think it'd be giving away too much. Yeah.
Oh, right. When can we expect to see that?
I think it's going to be this year, but I wouldn't promise. It's not by no means a starring role, but I very much enjoyed doing it, and I do say a little bit more than I did in Scully.
What about theatre? Would you like to work in the theatre?
It's never appealed to me really. I only I did a piece sort of gala night thing a couple of years ago where I had just a walk-on role playing Susanna York's Sexual Fantasy, which is something that lots of people would like to see, I'm sure. I had to hide in a cupboard and burst out dressed as a Prussian guardsman.
Oh yeah.
And if you can imagine me and a Prussian guardsman, you can imagine how ridiculous that looked. And just the nerves of the people when we were waiting to go on, I think if that would be contagious. I don't think I could stand it. I think I'd be on Valium or something by the end of the week, you know. So it's never appealed. And
yet you can do what you do.
I like live shows, yeah, but then again, you know, when I did acting things such as they are, albeit very brief, they obviously quite, you know, you still let other people down if you get it wrong. I have no experience of anything like that. I don't have the same technical control. Like I know if I can hit a note on any given night. If it's a high note, I know if my voice is in the shape to hit it.
Yeah.
But if I were to be acting, I don't have the training. I don't know how loud my voice is going to get. If I get loud, it could get too loud. I don't have that same technique down, and that takes a lot of learning, and you can't just waltz in there and just do it off the top of your head. It's really presumptuous, and so many musicians make awful fools of themselves trying to do just that, even taking starring roles in films, not mentioning any sort of members of the Rolling Stones or red-headed kind of former R&B singers and spacemen, you know. So.
Subtle. From theatre to cabaret and Agnes Burnell.
From theatre to theatre.
And how did the...
Well, back to the top. If anybody's still listening out there from the first thing to say.
Ages ago with Chansonnette by Agnes Burnell.
From Father's Lying Dead on the Ironing Board.
On the Ironing Board.
Well, I'm quite obviously proud of this record because it's the first long playing release, you know. So, And it was the kind of project that really couldn't be done on just a single chansonette, and the single, which is the B-side, in fact, of the single Tootsies, would just give you an idea of these songs. I mean, really, it would take another hour to tell Agnes Spinell's story to do it justice. She came from Berlin just before the war, where her father was an impresario in the theatre, and because she was exiled because of her parentage being half Jewish, she worked in this sort of exile satiric cabaret during the war and in propaganda radio, and then went on to a very varied career in the theatre and in cabaret in the 60s, and then lived in Ireland and working at the Abbey and doing radio, doing one-woman shows. So doing theatrical roles and also doing one-woman shows based around Brechtian material. But she also, in the late 50s, early 60s, translated, or we should say really adapted, so strictly speaking, rewrote the lyrics in English of songs by a man named Jochen Ringelnatz and some other songs which became her almost personal repertoire, which together with a man named Michael Dress, who wrote the music, created this whole repertoire of her own. And she's continued to do these things. There was a film made about her in Ireland. She's done radio shows and so forth. But up until now, there'd been no proper record of them. No, sort of where the budget allowed the proper kind of settings to bring the songs to life. They're very unusual, and in the time we have now, there isn't really enough time to tell you all the background. But I do urge people to try and give it a listen. It's not It's not happy-go-lucky, mindless stuff. But then on the other hand, it's not pompous, self-important, pious music either. It comes from a time where the kind of humour and satire was perhaps more subtle and didn't always have an obvious political point. But I'm sure people will find things in it which they'll understand today and love, hopefully. And as Philip Chevron produced the record, he was the one that brought the record to my attention, working again in his official capacity as the Impé&R man. And following up the idea of doing Philip's record, Captains and the Kings, with an orchestra or with a small string ensemble, he used every kind of musical group to bring the songs to life, in an appropriate way. And on the track we're going to play, in fact, we have the Three Mustaphas 3, who back Agnes on this track. Is called Hafen Kneipe.
Agnes Spinell and Hafen Kneipe. So what's next for you? Because we saw you performing about must be about 3 weeks ago now, at the Portland.
Yeah, that wasn't me. It was the Pope of Pop.
Pope of Pop. Sorry.
It was my other incarnation.
Yeah.
Cardinal Sin and the Pope of Pop. That's what my album is going to be called, the Pope of Pop and his Cardinal Sins. I've been doing a few...
You have to devote to yourself. I mean, when you're looking after so many other people, it seems as though...
Well, I'm not really. It makes it sound really kind of pompous, I'm not really looking after anybody. I'm just doing these things. I mean, I'm just employed to do them, but you've got to do them with some love, and you have to want to do them in the first place to do a good job, So, and for myself, having only made like 3 appearances and in very fleeting appearances live, I mean, this has been a good time for me to get my breath back from the touring, the rigors of touring, and reconsider how I might appear butterfly-like later in the year. The main thing I'm doing in the next from my own career is that I'll be going on a tour of Australia. The Coward Brothers will be going on a tour of Australia, and re-emerge hopefully from unscathed from that experience. It's in a sense, Australia being the only place left English speaking or sort of English speaking where I can play new material and people hopefully be able to understand me first time off, provided I sing half the songs in strine. It's a good. The reason for doing the Pope of Pop gig was really, it was a great opportunity for me to just play 14 brand new songs, so I don't often get the opportunity, because if I bill it as ELVIS Costello and the Attractions, we go up there and people expect to hear certain songs. Well, perhaps in the future they might be disappointed by expecting certain songs, I'm going to maybe, I have no idea what I'll do next in terms of live performance, except I'm going to do this one tour, which, because I want to play Australia solo, as I enjoyed doing it, and I learned a tremendous amount playing solo, and particularly with new material, you learn the strengths and weaknesses, and you can rewrite stuff before going into the studio in the summer and doing an album. And also, people should look out for Tbone Burnett, who will be in town in early July.
Final track, Elvis, Knows Alison.
I think this is the most appropriate song I could have possibly picked, considering the amount I've been talking and some of the things I've been saying. So we won't dedicate this to any of the people that are on the radio during the day. It's called Your Mind is on Vacation, but Your Mouth is Working Overtime.
It's been a pleasure. But Your Mouth is Working Overtime. Once again, thank you to Elvis Costello. What a nice man. 9:30, here's Jane Howroyd.
Radio 1 Everton has won the European Cup Winners' Cup.